Aye, so good evening everyone again. I thought I'd do another funny monologue. Um, yeah, now as you all know, um, I've got other things I want to talk about, funny things as well, you know. Um, I'm having a quick one, right? Because I sound funnier when I'm stoned. It's just about this noise. I'm getting pain. You know what I mean? I'm getting old. Not everything else in this one, but anyway, what I was going to talk about was, um, well, anybody that's for Glasgow or anything like that. And well, Fancy and Josie were my idols, you know what I mean? But I could talk about a lot of things really. I mean, fuck's sake, I could talk about Eric Markham and Ernie Wise and the genius they were, you know what I mean? But again, the two Ronnies, Philip Mackay, that's a good story, isn't it? Local hero. That's what we'll talk about tonight, right? Both aside, obviously, right? Well, as you know, he did Sinking Feeling and Gregory's Gone, right? So we know them, right? And Local Hero was the one up in the, you know what I mean, with Fulton Mackay. That's brilliant, that film. Absolutely brilliant. It's a classic. Um, then you Comfort and Joy with Bill Patterson. You know, that was interesting as well. You know, the Mr. Bunny ice cream. It's like it was written for me as a Wayne, wasn't it? Not Bunny that was. But anyway. Aye, and Restless Natives obviously was the Anderson Centre tribute. And then, you know. But anyway, getting back to Arbroath, that's what I was going to talk about tonight. Well, I mean, Christ, thank you. Just gonna clear my throat. I've got a frog in it from 1984. But yeah, what was I going to say? A cup of tea also is in dinner, usually. But anyway, no, what I was going to talk about was Arbroath and the Glasgow Fair fortnight. I thought I'd bring that up now. Now, a lot of people in Dundee probably didn't ken like, I can say a pay like, I can take the take like, I can take the pass. Mind your heat like. I ken what about you like, what, how, I don't give a fuck. I'm universal credit again. No, seriously, but this is. I feel like fucking Ricky Fulton and what was that last call? Remember that? Ricky Fulton. Oh, that Scotch and Rye, that was funny as fuck, wasn't it? I'd love to see Hogmanay like that again. You know, the old great Doogie Donnelly and all that. Remember Archie McPherson? Arthur Montford, remember him? But they were good though. They were. Glenn Michael, Cavalcade. There's a connection that I can take to the what do you call it? The Magnum Centre and everything. I never really get much time in that building. Again, that was a 70s kind of coolness and that, you know. And it had one single corridor, again, with loads of fluorescent lights. But there was loads of them, but it was a huge long corridor. And I always remember that everything was partitioned off either side. And there was this one tall walkway, like walking top of a kind of pyramid kind of shape, you know what I mean? That was cool about that building. But again, it's. But getting back to what was I talking about again? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll finish off the new Whitehill School talk, right? I don't want to talk about the old annex, right? Because it's, right, no, I know what happened, right? If I can explain it in a more logical sense, if any of you have ever watched The Changeling with George C. Scott, 1979 it was made in Columbia, you know what I mean, Canada. Well, if you watch that, you'll get the story of what happened to the building here in Glasgow, in a different kind of sense, but the same kind of negative entity that was in that other film from 1979, which was creepy as fuck. It was like the school that me and my dad was into, and I never thought of that back then as a kid, that there was bad and good in the world. I always thought the world was colour, like the Oz line. But I was basically like Dorothy, born into a black and white world, no looking at reality of what Glasgow was in 1979, and the torment in the city, you know. So this was going to be a happy story tonight, but I think we'll talk about something different. It's in educational. I just want to think about, what do you want to think about? I think partly why Cumbernauld was built in East Kilbride was to get rid of the bad housing problem in Glasgow then, right? But it worked for a wee while. Again, that's why Cumbernauld was built, as an overspill to Glasgow. It was just, by that point in history, that part of Glasgow was kind of knackered, right? Now, going back to the 70s, original Whitehall School, you've got to remember that from, I can't remember what year it was, so I'd need to look it up, but it was a long time ago, right? 1800s. It's very likely that that school in If, that film with Malcolm McDowell, carried the torment of it in that actual building I was in. Because it was originally a gymnasium at the top for boxing and playing football and all that kind of stuff, right? But in the ground floor, it was a kind of workshop tool area, and like just like like a kind of workshop for tools and tech. What was it they called that again? Wood tech, in school and that. Using hammers and chisels and stuff like that, Bunsen burners and all that kind of. But the weird thing about that building, and in fact, let's just continue to talk about this building, right, from 79 onwards, right? Because I keep diverting the conversation about it when I cover it usually, but I think I'm steering it in the right direction now. Let's focus on the class of 83 in there, as in, well, me and all my pals that we used to know. I can give you loads of shout outs here, but I'm not going to though, so don't worry. But I remember these all though, that day. Yeah, and some we lost as well, I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wasn't really wanting to talk about Darren, because Darren died in 87. He was one of my best pals in school. Well, he was merely a pal than other pals, if you know what I mean. And he died. He died in Gartham Drive in Denison. 87, I think, 1987. It was pretty fucked up. I was in shock. And again, it didn't help with my mental health. And then, well, the other thing that happened in the Whitehall School, I don't want to talk about that, right? I think you all probably know what that is, right? Let's just forget that, right? Because that's something I can't talk about. With respect for the family, right? But that was pretty hard. But again, the community came together in Denison, like it does in Lochee, There were tough times in Glasgow, it wasn't easy, especially in the 70s, realistically, it wasn't that great. I mean, like I say, with that old school, when we went in there, it was fucking. Don't forget, it was a bit like the Hal spaceship getting reactivated again, right? But in reverse, as in when we put the key in the door and opened it up, and the air and light rushed in, it did something to me because from that point onwards, my dad used to leave me there, the like station master, to look after the building, right? And I was in the building a lot more on my own as a kid when it was first getting developed. And I'm talking 80s, early 80s, 81, 82. One of my pals, Paul Beattie. I wonder if that's Beattie Construction, that'd be interesting. But my mate Paul Beattie, he was, me and him used to help fix up things in the old school annex. So shout out to you, mate, if you're still with us, you know. But yeah. But again, the building had flaws. I mean, the water was no right for a start. There was a funny metallic taste to the water because it had lead pipes in it, you see. But the story I was going to tell you tonight about the place is really strange. And it isn't a story either. But I'm going to try and make it sound calm rather than dangerous, right? And again, it's to do with a faulty light, or faulty lights, using faulty towers in reverse again, right? In the building, originally, it was like a one big main floor with like a toilet block and a shower block, right? Um, it wasn't the bonniest of buildings inside. It was Victorian kind of level, you know. It was kind of strange and mysterious, you know. Um, but there was a lot of stuff in that building that was already there when we arrived, if you know what I mean. But it just didn't know that. We didn't know that yet, if you know what I mean. Right? Because we put in a fake security alarm in the centre, right? What I mean is, we never actually monitored the security of the building. It was one of these kind of early detection systems where if it spotted something paranormal, it would come on and flash red. It would stay on red though. It was like a heat-seeking device, right? But it could also pick up interactions with spirit. Later, we found, right? This is how fucked up it is, right? Now, it was a big building. I mean, it had 3 floors. Well, 2.5 floors. The ground floor became the gymnasium eventually. And the middle floor was where all the sports and other stuff went on, right? Like golf, boxing, pensioner tables. You know, my dad cared for everybody in that building. He wasn't just doing it for the kids, he was doing it for the old folk. You know what I mean? He helped out loads of folk for fuck all to give kids a future because they never had it in his day. So he wanted to do something for the community back, do remembering his original school. And I think that's something to be proud of, you know. And I'm very proud of my dad for that. Took a lot of guts for him to get all the funding from Glasgow City Council or Strathclyde Regional Council it was back then. But yeah, my dad was fucking. He was a man, you know what I mean? He was. But anyway, he died in 2014. He had Parkinson, you know, he was in a care home in Cantine with T Woodbine and a lot of rain. Yeah. But he's, yeah, but anyway, let's not think about too much of that. I just want my dad to be aware that I know what happened to the place, you know. But there was a lot of weird stuff going on in the building. Like again, like in the Hanson Street building, there was faulty problems within that place as soon as I walked in. I could feel this kind of it was like, I don't know, it was like a dark feel about the building. That something was brewing within it. But it was like, I can't explain it, it's very hard. There was something alright with that building. It had, the wiring was all messed up for a start. The light switches would never come on in order, sometimes. Especially on the ground floor. It was more so on the ground floor where the energy was more heavier. Because the lights in the upper floor had, well, this is again another thing that was different about that building. This is a strange thing, and it's really interesting, this story, if you want to listen to it. And it's all about fluorescent lamps, seriously. Because right through 1980, 81, 82, it opened in 83 obviously, there was a lot of refurbishment done to it to try and fix it, you know, but it was still, no, it was still never perfect. But it was functioning though, it had light, it had heat, it had necessities in it, you know. And by this point, a lot of the lights had been changed as well up the stairs. New fluorescent lights put in there certain areas. The bottom floor had original fluorescent lights, but they weren't working very well, so we had them upgraded, right, to brand new lights. And again, there was something fucked up there too. The lights weren't working right. There was 9 fluorescent lights. See all the ones you see in 9 Mills, the hospitals, on that big long walkway I was in, right? Lights like that, right? But they just weren't right though. They weren't working right. They were sequencing, they were coming on, but they were very dim. Or some of them just wouldn't come on at all. And you try to jump start them with a spark, you know, in the switch, and they would come on for a brief moment, then they would just die off again. So right away, I sensed there was something alright inside that building because of the lights. The lights was like, they're no, they're, I mean, there was 2 at the far back that didn't come on at all, ever, and they were brand new lights, and yet they were wired up right. But there was clearly a fuck up somewhere in the building, somewhere else, but we didn't know what it was. And again, I don't really want to get into too much of why it was. Yeah, I think it was that. But let's not think about that. That's seriously fucked up. But I felt energy in that building. In 79 I felt it. 80 when we first got the keys, like I say. We went in and you went up the old stairs and it was the old coffee lights and that, and it was really creepy, right? Because a lot of the windows had been boarded up like a haunted house, you know what I mean? But in reverse, it was becoming an unhaunted house to become a fucking haunted sports centre instead. But thankfully, because my dad's energy was so good, it kept the demons, well, the demon side it, demon seed. You know, there you go then. That's maybe where that's came from. Because when Whitehill School was demolished in 77, no, sorry, when it closed in 77. Ah, see. Right. Well, that makes sense. Because the building definitely had a dark feel about it. I mean, I used to walk about it at night, or even during the day, with all the lights blaring on all the floors, right? And I always felt like, you know how Danny in The Shining, when he's in the hotel, wandering about with all the empty space with the lights on, right? You know, in the kitchens and all that. It was like that for me in that building. It was like really, I felt something was there, but I didn't know what it was, you know what I mean? But I could feel it in here, you know, genuinely I did. I felt, it wasn't bad energy, but it just felt weird energy. It was kind of, you could feel it was something within the building that was no peace, shall we say. In later years it came to be like just how evil the building was because of all the fucking anger from before, you know, in the 70s, and the 60s and 50s. You think of the classroom bullying back in the days, right? So there was a lot of fighting within boys' schools or whatever school, mixed schools, it doesn't matter. So if all that energy is locked into a building, and then, you know what I mean, if you believe in stuff like that, there's a lot of residual energy going to pop back up again if you open the door, Pandora's box. Basically, that's what that building was. As long as it, see when it was closed down in 77, it should have just, you know what I mean, been knocked down by that point. But it wasn't. Because of 1979, that's when it all fucked up in there as well. It's very odd, isn't it? Yeah, it's really crazy. But going back to the building, there's a lot of weird stuff in there. You know, just weird stuff. Do you remember the old Prestex toilet plungers? They've got them in the Bank Bar in Dundee. In white, is it? Aye, the Bank Bar. Aye. Prestex, red and blue taps. Yeah. See, they were in my dad's old gymnasium and all. But the building always had a weird feel about it. Because I used to go into it and sit in there sometimes with the lights on. And sometimes the lights would just go off by themselves, you know. And there was one occasion again with a faulty fluorescent in the top gym. Whoever remembers when we used to use it, right? For our little karate and our fucking roller discos, right? When the fucking mats and all that, right? It was like a scene for Carrie, wasn't it? Because the light at the back, you remember it had the divine window, right? With the fan. Well, the far right backlight, I know that sounds bad. Okay, I'll say top right backlight, right? It went, it went on fire, basically. Now again, I can relate that to something as well. Now that spark and that light didn't cause the fire in the building, so don't think that, right? It wasn't that. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. No, but there was a well. I tell you what, we'll talk about. We'll talk about Cumbernauld, right? Might as well, because when the Corbett was there, no. We'll do a wee fab with that. Well, yeah. We've not even talked about a broth in the soup yet. The fish. Oh, the broth fish. That's a good one. I've got 2 ton of cod and 2 ton of haddock in my fish. No, but fuck. What are we up to anyway? 23 minutes. Still not talked about it properly yet, have we? It's just amazing though how the things I remember though. You know? But anyway. But anybody that's free Whitehall Secondary in Denison, you don't mind the old canteen with the lights, don't you? And the orange, because the orange leather seats. You know what I mean? And they had the orange curtains, remember? It was very 60s, wasn't it? Like 2001 Space Odyssey, wasn't it? With the rectangular lights. They were cool as fuck then. Yeah, that school was cool for its time. I had the big, what do you call it? The theatre. You know what I mean? In the centre, remember that? Yeah, that was good. It was a lecture theatre, you know. But yeah, it was interesting. Good building. And it's still there, thankfully. But I remember when it was quite new, pretty new, in the late 70s now. And it was different from other schools in a lot of ways. It was nothing like the original Whitehall, completely different. Like I say, the annex was a swimming pool and the gymnasium part, you know. But the actual school itself opened, and I think the first headmaster was Mr. Thompson, I believe. Now, I don't really want to talk about him because I heard stories about him being a bad person as a headmaster, quite strict, very strict actually. You know. In fact, I think he might be the teacher that haunts the building now to this day. It could be because there was a lift when he's on mind that lift in the concourse, remember, at the stairs, the silver lift with the glass window in it, through the looking glass, right? Now again, those buttons on those lifts were like the ones I was talking about in Finefair. The silver lifts with the red thing. And the first floor, the lights were always on, right? And the ground floor, the lights were on. Well, some of them were switched off at the dining, but the main foyer lights were still on at that end. But they were still the same rectangular drop ceiling lights. I loved them. I love those dim buildings, even in America and that. But to see them in Denison in the 70s, the era From Here to Eternity from Giorgio Moroder or something, like real disco. It had that funky 70s vibe about it, like something in America. Just some American, I don't know, American high school. You know what I mean? But it was like that though, in Denison. It was like we got the American dream in Denison. Does that make sense? In that school. Yeah, more reversal. But yeah, well there you go. Universal credit again. But yeah, we had a lot of good times in that school as well, But I always remember, what was his name again? Oh, the guy that used to have Mr. Wishart, that was his name. I think he was one of my school teachers. I think he was in the maths department at the school. And this is about 1986. No, wait a minute. 85. 85. I'll get into why in a minute. But even then, there was polystyrene tiles missing through the ceiling with leaks in the roof, I don't know. The building's still there, so it's still made it. But there's a lot of buildings in Glasgow that are still there. Heaven House, that's still there. The Anderson Centre is half there. I've cut. I've seen this, but nah, but you know what I mean. Just they exist, but they're just existing. They belong, but they don't belong. That kind of feeling. Or they used to belong. Like the Anderson Centre used to be. I mean, to see that brought back to how it used to be in the 70s would have been something. Because I think the original Travelator was the greatest starship entrance, you know what I mean? It was like Beam Me Up Scotty, It was just that vision that I had you were heading into this future world, It's fucking amazing, that building. Again, why it was, I don't know. It's just weird, but there you go. It's kind of fucking. But anyway, look, I'm going to wrap it up soon. But like I say, it's just been one of these days. I think I'll call it a night now. Eat some Turkish delight and then watch some Winnie the Pooh. Right, anyway, I'll take it up to 29, 27. Peace out, brothers and sisters, right? Take care. Love yous all. Good night. God bless.